July 8th, Nambari, August 7th, 1942. Tulagi waters glitter like mercury under a hard tropical sun. The horizon is a razor of blue. The smell of salt and spilled oil hangs in the air. 8 Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers wheel in a slow, disciplined circle above the island. Slow, patient, lethal, waiting for orders as US Marines fight for a narrow strip of shoreline on Guadalcanal. Far above that ring of blue and green, a thin silver shape dives from the sun, a Mitsubishi A6M0, a silhouette the Americans had come to fear. The Zero slides into view from behind, a hungry hunter catching a scent. The pilot presses his stick and pulls his aircraft tight alongside the circling Dauntlesses, thinking speed and surprise are his allies. In that single, bright moment, 1,000 choices collapse into one. He does not yet know this close pass will cost him nearly everything he values: his sight, his body, his world. He is Saburo Sakai. He is 25 years old, a product of the Imperial Japanese Navy's School of Silence and Reserve. He is lean, practiced, and careful, a veteran with years of hours in the cockpit and a code written into his bones: precision, courage, duty. Born in Saga Prefecture, trained at Kasumigaura, hardened over China and the early strikes of the Pacific, Sakai carries the quiet gravity of a man who has watched comrades fall and kept flying. His life is a ledger of aerial technique and a private promise to face whatever the mission orders. He believes in the blade of the machine and in the ritual of the fight. That belief is why he pulls his Zero in close, why he thinks to use the position of the sun and the angle of attack to his advantage. He is not reckless. He is a craftsman, and on this morning, the craft will betray him. The mission is not grand. It is desperate and ordinary. American forces have landed. The Japanese must contest the skies. The Dauntlesses above Tulagi are part of a larger ballet of carrier air and patrol aircraft, now converging on the Solomon Islands. These SBDs fly low, steady, and heavily armed. Their rear gunners a blunt instrument against any attacker who mistakes a bomber's slowness for weakness. For the men in those 8 cockpits, the threat is visible and deadly. For Sakai, approaching from the rear, the calculus seems in his favour. A quick pass, a burst of fire, and the Dauntless is history. He does not notice the spacing, the steady crossfire pattern, the rearwards arc formed by gunners with bricks of 30 and 50 caliber in their hands. He brings his Zero close enough to see the canvas and rivets, to see the pilot's face beneath the goggles. That proximity is a cruelty of war, intimate, immediate, and merciless. When the bullets find him, they find the cockpit. Return fire from an SBD's rear gun tears into the canopy, into the glass of his world. A machine gun slug strikes his face. For a moment he hears nothing but the high, thin sound of tearing. Pain is a bright clinical instrument, unconsciousness a cold veil. He falls from the sky, not into death, but into a new geometry of survival. Blood floods his vision. One eye goes dark, the other swims with the taste of copper. Limbs refuse to obey. The Zero, ragged and burning with the wounds of combat, is a fragile, angry thing, and yet it answers his hands. For hours he will fight it home. He will keep pulling, throttle set like a prayer, coaxing metal and machine toward a base that sits 400, 500 miles behind him. Every mile is a small miracle. Every breath is a debt. He does not crash. He does not die in a spray of salt and flame. He brings his aircraft back, a ruined ark arriving at Rabaul on a tired wing. The cost is physical and precise: a blinded right eye, paralysis along one side, a skull cracked by the impact of a fragment, pain that will not be anaesthetized easily in makeshift field hospitals. He will hold his shattered leather flight helmet like a relic for the rest of his life, a fibrous record of metal tearing through cloth and bone. For months he will be out of the war, convalescing in hospitals, enduring surgeries that are primitive and brutal by modern standards. The Zero he flew that day will be another kind of testament, a machine returned to Earth with a pilot who, despite everything, will fly again. The deed that almost ended him will also become the hinge of a story far stranger than combat. The slow, awkward movement from enemy to human being. War History Online. Back with the American formation, the man who fired is Harold L. Jones, a rear-seat gunner aboard an SBD in that ring of 8 above Tulagi. He's a young sailor doing his job: scan the sky, find threats, squeeze the trigger when the moment comes. In the cockpit of his Dauntless, the world reduces to a tube of steel and sight, and his response is mechanical, conditioned by training and the fierce, immediate logic of survival. He will later remember the flash silhouette, the way metal glinted, the moment the Zero came too close. He will remember seeing a plane that simply did not belong flying into his bead. He will not know then the name of the man in that cockpit, nor the fate his bullets will visit upon him. He is, like every combatant in that moment, anonymous and essential. What follows is not grandiose theatre, but the quiet terror of consequence. Sakai, half-blinded and paralysed on one side, does what only a few men have done. He forces his damaged Zero to cross hundreds of miles of hostile ocean and hostile sky, nursing a machine that will not cooperate, steering with one good eye and iron will. He arrives, exhausted and near collapse, and the Navy surgeons and medics work to pull him back from the edge. There is no immediate gratitude, no sudden clarity, only the sterile light of operating rooms, the smell of iodine, the coarse clatter of instruments. For Harold Jones and the other Americans, the mission continues. They press on, with the long days of Guadalcanal fighting, and the exhausting, grinding advance of a war that did not pause for the fate of a single pilot. For Sakai, the silence that follows the scream of gunfire is loud enough to change him. Years pass. The map of the Pacific reconfigures with blood and iron. Islands change hands. Carriers are sunk and replaced. Whole squadrons of men vanish from the ledger of the living. Sakai survives the war and returns to a country that has become a different landscape of ruins and quiet. He is a man with a damaged body and a conscience that will not let him rest. He becomes, in later life, an advocate for peace and a pilgrim of reconciliation. He will keep the helmet with the holes in it, and, in time, he will seek the faces of the men who shot him, not to punish them, but to unmake the last sharp edges of combat. The choice to reconcile is not sentimental. It is exacting. It requires remembering the wound, naming the enemy as once a human adversary, and then deciding to see that human again. On Memorial Day 1982, a meeting is arranged that reads like the last scene of a long trial. Saburo Sakai sits across from Harold L. Jones. The air between them is full of old storms, men and machines and the weight of orders. There is no script, no show of magnanimity required by law. There is only two men whose lives once intersected in violence now trying to hold the fragile fact of the other. Sakai produces the tattered helmet he kept. He shows the holes where bullets found purchase. Jones looks, and something like recognition moves through him. They shake hands, they exchange gifts, they tell no lies. They tell each other what they must, that war made monsters of duty, that fate spares no pride. The meeting does not erase the dead. It simply makes one small slope of ground less lonely. Those who witnessed it would later say it was a rare and terrible thing. Enemies becoming, at last, people who could sit across a table and measure the import of mercy. There is a silent arithmetic that the war could not calculate. A single choice in a span of seconds can fracture a life, but across years the same life can seek an accounting that is not revenge. Sakai flew for honour and for country. He was wounded for acting on a pilot's instinct. Jones fired the gun he was trained to use. He did so with the same mechanical resolve that kept him and his comrades alive. Years later, when they met, neither man pretended the past could be smoothed away. Instead, they did something rarer. They acknowledged the human cost and accepted the shared burden of memory. The photographs from that afternoon show two old men, hands clasped, the helmet between them like an altar. Their faces are lined with weather and war. There is no triumph in those images, only the fragile, stubborn insistence that enemies can become witnesses to one another's suffering. In the end, the story is not a lesson dressed as history. It is a human thing. A pilot who lost an eye, who flew a crippled plane for 5 hours across a vast, indifferent sea. A rear gunner who did his duty and spent the rest of his life carrying that moment like a stone. A meeting decades later that did not absolve anything but made the ledger human again. The cameras and books will remember the tactics, the manoeuvres, the count of aircraft lost and saved. But what remains after the statistics is quieter and less neat. It is the image of two men, once set to kill one another by the logic of nations, choosing finally to recognize each other as men. The war taught them to fly and to kill. Their later lives taught them another craft, how to come close and not to strike. That is the last haunting measure of the day a Japanese Zero pulled alongside 8 American dive bombers and nearly paid the price of everything for the mistake of belonging to a world in which ordered violence was how duty was shown.
Thanks for watching. Drop a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to watch more videos like this.